Thank you for joining us on Quantum today. And today we have Jen Sullivan with us today, and we're going to talk about her journey and how she became an author and her stories that she's sharing with the world. So let me introduce you today. We have Jen, and how are you doing today, Jen?
Hey, I'm doing great today. It's a beautiful day out, and I'm really excited to talk to you. I've been looking forward to this.
Wonderful. Me too. Thank you very much. And I definitely want to get started with you and your story and just how kind of things started unfolding for you. And can you please share with us, from what you remember from the very beginning?
Yeah, definitely. So, pretty much everything started for me in 2017 when uh, I lived in the Florida Keys, and one day we got a warning saying a massive hurricane was heading right for us, and evacuation orders got put in. So my family pretty much closed up our house and our businesses, and we fled the Florida Keys. And when we came back, everything was gone. Our whole community had been devastated. We had 14 feet of water coming through the island, and it was a mess, and it was a disaster zone afterwards. And when my husband and I started to rebuild and to go through the process of dealing with our insurance companies and dealing with our local government, we just met one massive problem after another, and we ended up having to live on our front lawn with our kids for a long time before they even started picking garbage up. I'm talking like 8 months that we lived in the hurricane debris before our local government would even come in and do anything, or the insurance companies would help us out with starting to rebuild. So we went through a really strange and stressful time. And during that time, I woke up one morning while we were trying to rebuild our home, and I couldn't see out of this eye. And so I went to top-notch medical facilities at the University of Miami, at Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, and we were trying to figure out what was going on with me. And I had lots of recommendations from my doctors. I had to do some really invasive medical procedures. I had my birth control removed because they thought that may have been causing it. There were lots of different things that were going on, but nothing was causing me to have any break from the symptoms, which were incredible headaches, tons of pressure. I couldn't really see out of this eye anymore. And when you're dealing with that and you're living in a pile of disaster with your small children, it could be a really challenging experience. So I wasn't getting any better. The medication the doctors gave me to help fix my eye problem was actually giving me kidney problems and making me sicker in a lot of different ways. So I wasn't progressing towards anything. And one day I had a phone call from a woman I know that I was friendly with at the school that my children went to, that I had been a teacher at. And her name is Sarah Breskman Cosme, and she's a hypnotist. And she's actually a pretty famous hypnotist now. When we started, though, we were pretty much still on that level of beginning. And she called me up and she asked me if I was interested in just participating in something she had to do for her hypnosis class. She was trying to accelerate from a QHHT hypnotist on the second level, which is the form that Dolores Cannon does. And I know you're familiar with it. And she was looking to progress to her level 3, and she needed to pass through and show this video recording of just a client or someone who needed to have a regression done. And we started doing our hypnosis like that. Sarah didn't know I was sick at the time. I kept that very private. I didn't share that with anyone. So when she came to me and she asked me about it, I was very receptive towards it, because I thought, well, at this point, even though I don't really think that kind of stuff works, I wasn't very like open-minded towards hypnosis. I didn't think it was going to do much. I thought, well, at this point, what have I got to lose? There's nothing else here for me to try. The doctors are done treating me, and I'm still in a lot of pain, and I still can't see anything. So why not? I'll give it a shot with her. And at the very least, I can at least help her get her next level and get a couple of hours away from my screaming children. So in early 2018, we started doing this. And the first session I had was remarkable. I was not a believer. I didn't think I could be hypnotized. I didn't think it was going to do much of anything. But when the session was over and while the session was going on, I could feel like this draining happening from behind my eye, the one that I had lost my vision in. And by the time the session was over, when I opened my eyes, I could see again out of this eye. And it was amazing for me. And I realized I was onto something. So we just kept doing our sessions and we did them for 3 years. And are you still there? Mm. Ah, there you are.
There you are.
There we go. All right. I lost you for a minute. Sorry about that. If it's my internet on this end, it could be a little shoddy sometimes.
It's okay. The last thing I heard you say was whenever you came back from your regression, you could see out of
Hmm.
your eye again. And so just as you finished that statement, the the recording cut off. And then it came back. So I'm glad we're back. And so before that session, before the storm even
Hmm.
happened, did you have any synchronicities or anything happen, um, spiritually? Was there anything, were there any signs pointing towards what you're about to face, especially with the storm or with your eye? And do you know of anything that um like that alignment in which that started happening for you? Because you said that the storm happened first and then your eye.
Hmm.
So tell me about that.
With my eye. So here's a weird thing that happened before the storm. My entire life, I've had these weird dreams since I was a child. And I'm talking like little kid, I can remember them. And these dreams I always would have were the same every time. And I would be on a beach and it would be about dusk, but not sunrise yet. It was just that darkness before the sunrise is about to come up. And I would look towards the ocean and there would be this massive amount of water, like this big tsunami, like tremendous wave just crashing towards me, coming towards me. And I would always see it and I'd panic and I'd feel this crazy energy, this panic. And I'd turn, and to the back of me, there was always this white cliff wall, like a front to a wall, not like a man-made wall, but a wall that had been, constructed by nature, just a white cliff. And in the dreams, I always turn and I'm trying to climb up them, and I could always feel like my fingers bleeding a little bit, and like just trying to get away and get up to something, thinking that but the wave is always bigger than the cliff is, and I couldn't understand what that was. And I hadn't had the dream for a little while. And the week before the hurricane hit, almost exactly a week before it, I had that dream. And in the dream, I had my family there with me, my partner, my children, and it was kind of terrifying. And when I woke up and I told him all about it, it was like, it's just a dream. And 4 days later, we were evacuating with, a bag of clothes each and whatever we could get out of the Keys with. So I think there was a bit of a premonition there that's always been there for me to kind of help me understand. And if you understand what I understood in my regressions later on, the wave dream comes back full force. And it really helped me understand what that was and what the universe was trying to help me understand about my situation. And with that, I've always found there was some interesting synchronicities with the dream and different things that happen in my life.
Leading up to that
Yeah, to
event
bigger
and
things,
to
and
that.
or to yeah, to things that I need to be kind of aware of or warned about. I feel like it's always been a warning dream, like water, especially that wave always has its place. I think we're just biologically like whatever, we're linked in some way. It's
Oh
kind of
yeah.
force on its own. It's
Yeah.
not just a
Well,
wave, but
I believe we're fully in tune with nature. So
totally.
and if that's within the cellular memory, then you're probably just going through that timeline and cycle over again, you know.
Oh,
Um, so tell me about your session with Sarah and that healing process for you.
definitely. So leading up to my sessions with Sarah, I was very like scientifically based. I I was a journalist before this, so I was always like, I need two sources to know everything's true. I don't believe half of what you see and none of what you hear kind of a person. I just wasn't really very open. When I say open, I wasn't optimistic that this was something that could help people. I thought maybe on one level or another it comforts people, but it's not something that's like real. It's not like this carton of milk in the store that I can go purchase. It's not a finite object. So I one day, probably, oh God, maybe about a year before the hurricane came in, I had just opened up my own business and I was watching YouTube trying to find some business ideas on it. And this recording came on that just started automatically playing, and it was an Abraham Hicks recording. And I had never, I was like, wow, what the hell is this? This is really interesting. Why are that, and it stuck in my head and it stuck in my head. And not that much later, Sarah was a visitor, a patron to my business, and she brought her kids over, and I just felt this weird, I was like, hey, have you ever heard of this, like Abraham Hicks? And she was like, of course I have. I've got books. I've got all kinds of information about Abraham Hicks if you're interested. And I think that's kind of where things started with our sessions for Sarah and I, was that we had this kind of understanding, like, you know what I mean? Like, she was not a hypnotist at that point. It was more like weight loss and smoking cessation for people who lived locally. She wasn't really doing as much QHHT. So I think there was a little spark there for the two of us when I started understanding a bit more from these recordings. And she gave me some books to read. And she said that's why she kept thinking of me when she had to do her QHHT level 3 project, was that, you know, my face kept popping into her head and she kept thinking about the Abraham Hicks stuff. And she said, no, I think this is the right person to do this session with. So when we started the sessions off, we kind of started them like that with just a little bit of like understanding, but I didn't know what QHHT was really. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And it was a very awakening experience for me on a lot of levels. So
Right. And then, so when she asked you to do your sessions, tell me more about your eye and what you felt and how long you had been feeling that before your session.
yeah. Well, after the hurricane and I got this diagnosis, the condition is called pseudotumor cerebri, and it creates an excessive amount of cerebrospinal fluid in your brain, and it acts like small pockets of tumors that would press upon your brain and cause visual disturbances, cause stroke. It could cause a lot of different serious issues with your brain. So it was something that I wasn't taking lightly, but I wasn't finding any kind of, any remedy towards any of it. And Sarah mentioned to me, like, as we got started with the session, to make a list of some questions. And, if there was anything with my health that I wanted to address, then, let's address it. So I addressed it in the first session, and I wanted to know what was going on there and why was I having all this pain? Why was all this swelling, all this edema around my face and my eye? And I learned that there was a lot of things I needed to understand about myself, and not just on this physical reality, on this realm, but to understand who I had been before this, why I chose this life, and the things that predated this existence and how much they affected this lifetime. And if I wasn't going to become aware of them, and if I wasn't going to become conscious of them, then I was just going to continuously repeat a lot of the same things in my life and not waste this lifetime, because it's never a waste. It's always a learning experience, but I would not fulfill the goals I had set for myself in this existence before I came into this body. So for me to understand this in like my first session was kind of like, wow, that's a lot. Like I wasn't really there yet. I was just kind of getting into it, but I thought, you know what, I feel good. I can see better in my eye right now. This is the most like comfort and help I've gotten in like almost a year of dealing with this. So just keep going with it. If she's offering me free sessions, why not keep trying them? Why not keep seeing what it is? And Sarah would give me recordings of my sessions as well afterwards, digital recordings. And I found a lot of what I learned and a lot of my understanding and healing also came from re-listening to the recordings over and over and over again. And I would listen to them and just blindly like kind of take notes. I would do like an automatic writing while I was listening to them and sketch and things. And all of this information just started coming out of me, stuff I wasn't I don't want to say stuff I wasn't recognizing, but stuff I wasn't recognizing from this physical reality. Things, though, that I did understand and I did remember from somewhere else. And it was a difficult process at first to kind of fully grasp it and accept it, just because I think I walked in with a bit of less optimism than most people probably do for sessions. But once I started connecting all the puzzle pieces together and seeing that my past lives weren't just these separate incidences, but a collection of things that have created a whole situation that has made this life, it's kind of like apex moment, then I accepted it. I took it on and I've really embraced it as part of just who I am as just an eternal being. And it's brought so much happiness to my life. I can't even begin to tell you. It has brought clarity into my life in ways I never had before. I can see myself beyond just what I was and who I was and who I thought I was in this lifetime. It's amazing. And never
Yeah.
mind the fact that I could see out of my eye again. I was like, wow, that's pretty special as well. So of
Right.
course, I brought it to my doctor's attention and they thought, well, that's great.
Right.
Nobody wanted to take me seriously. Nobody thought they just went, well, you're in remission. Wonderful. Congratulations. We've accomplished our job. And, I walked out and got so little help with it from the medical world, but
Right. And how was that process for you from that scientific mind, and how did that unfold throughout your session until after your session? Because I'm sure that your conscious and awareness has expanded so much since then.
truly it's expanded so much. And I don't think I'll ever fully lose that little bit of me that is like, well, don't believe everything you hear. Experience, observe, understand, and try to put yourself in that person's position and take on whatever it is that's changed for them and understand it from that perspective. But I don't think I'll ever just be someone who's like, embrace everything. It's all real and it's all fake. I've always got a little bit of a healthy sense, well, whatever you want to call healthy, but a little bit of like, take things in and see how it pertains to you and how it pertains to other people. Be more of an observer and less judgment in your life about other people's theories and what they've experienced, and just allow everyone to have their healing in their own way.
Right, definitely. And then along your journey with your sessions, and as things was, those memories were coming back to you, what led you to decide to write a book or a story, or did that come through your session?
Both, actually. So when I first started my sessions with Sarah, I had been writing a completely different book, and I had no idea how it ended. I was kind of like confused about it. So I asked in one of the sessions, I said, I really would like to try to write this book. I get this weird urge, I need to write something, but I'm not getting too far with it. So, maybe we can ask in a session. And we did. And they said, well, that's because that's not the book you're supposed to be writing. And
Mm.
they said, this is the book you're supposed to be writing. You need to write this book first. Many years down the road, you'll finish that other book that you started, but it won't be for a long time. You need to just do this book. You need to take the notebooks and the transcripts from your sessions, and you need to piece them together, because we've created a puzzle for you. But when you do piece it together, there'll be a story there that you can share with people, and it will be beneficial to you and to your readers to have it out there. So I trusted that information and I said, all right, well, Sarah, do you want to write some books about this? And we decided to come on and divide it up, that Sarah would write the book that would be based on the transcripts from our sessions. And I was going to write a book about what the firsthand perspective of what it was like to live that lifetime. And so the first book that we wrote about was one of the first past lifetimes we discovered in our sessions, which was all about living during the times of Lemuria and Atlantis.
Yes, and tell me about that and your memories from that.
Yes, definitely. So the first memory I had of going to what you would call Lemuria, I call it Amun in my book, but was me standing on a beach. And I remember feeling, because you slowly during QHHT, you slowly enter the scene. It's not all at once and overwhelming. It's very slow. It's what do you feel? What do you see? What do you smell around you, kind of deal. And I felt smooth, small rocks underneath my feet while I stood on the shoreline of the beach. And I remember feeling like this is my beach. This is a private beach. And I started remembering, like, I know this beach really well. I've spent so much time here and I know my room's there. And I would remember like to turn and look, and there, that's where my home was. And that's where this was. And I slowly started to understand that I had lived during a time where there was a great matriarchy that ruled over a lost civilization that was in what you would call Polynesia, the South Pacific, somewhere out into the Pacific Ocean. And we once we started looking into that lifetime, we started noticing a lot of similarities between not only the lifetime that we're living right now and parallels to it, but also how it was affecting the healing of my eye and also the rebuilding of our community, which had just been destroyed by this massive wave as well. And it was very interesting to note that, like, in that lifetime, my entire civilization was destroyed by a giant wave. And I experienced that in that lifetime. So there were so many levels of like healing and understanding and just kind of like, mind expansive information. So we
Yeah.
did that for like a good 2 years almost. We just focused on that lifetime and anything else that would kind of come in. And we'd meet maybe every week or two and just sit and do our sessions. And then the pandemic hit and we
Yeah.
suddenly couldn't go anywhere. And we both just sat down for a couple of months and just worked together and we pounded these books out. And by the end of 2020, there were two books where there wasn't anything before that.
Right. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And then you have your book. So tell us about the title of Sarah's, and then share with us anything else about Sarah's book that you would like to share.
Sure. So Sarah Breskman Cosme is the name of the hypnotist that I worked with, and she's based out of the Florida Keys. Her first book, she has a couple of them, but the first book she put out was called A Hypnotist Journey to Atlantis. And this book is basically a compilation of the transcripts from our sessions. And a little bit of Sarah's experience as well in going through this from the hypnotist perspective and what she began to understand from the past lives that I had lived. And together we delved into this whole lifetime where I had lived in Lemuria as one of the daughters of these great matriarchs. And she had lived in Atlantis as the son of a very well-known judge who would later become a judge himself. And so I was able to see not only my past lives, but I was able to see hers and how we had connected in other existences as well.
Great.
So we kind of explored our lifetimes there for a while and understood that there was so much more going on than just beyond our lifetimes. And we started to see more of what had caused their destruction for both civilizations and what their weaknesses were, what their strengths were, what their people were like, their cultures were like. And it was a fascinating experience for me because there were a lot of things that I noticed that I had felt compelled towards in my life, or I had noticed in dreams, and they came back to me during these sessions. And things just started to make a lot more sense. It wasn't just this big ball of confusion of things I couldn't understand, and you put them away for another day and you never look at them again. Like, things just started to connect and connect and connect and connect. And before I realized it, it's like there is just a great universal effort to connect these things, and it's beyond me. And from there, it just opened up more
Yeah.
and more. So
Right.
we wrote out all of it, and just what a tremendous experience it was for both of us to go through.
Amazing. And then tell us about your book and the title and what we can find in there.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I got a copy of it over here for you, just to help. The visuals always help. So this is my first book. This is called Child of the Universe. And I write under the name JLF Sullivan just because I have a lot of first names and it's easier to kind of abbreviate them and throw them all in there. But this was my baby. This was the first one that I wrote during the pandemic, and this is all based about the lifetime that I experienced in Lemuria, and then again as a political prisoner taken from Lemuria and brought to Atlantis. And it explains the importance of those lifetimes to me as well, and how it also parallels out into the world that we saw reflected on us during 2020. It goes into just how civilizations can destroy themselves so easily. It doesn't really take all that much effort, and there are patterns that we tend to notice in history. And we're doomed to repeat them if we don't start to pay attention to them rather than ignoring these patterns. They're there for a reason. They go into all the synchronicities you see around the world, and it's a guiding light to show us we're meant to evolve in a different way. We're not meant to continuously keep destroying ourselves, even though that seems to be something very, I don't know, common. It just doesn't kind of go away. And for anyone who's interested, like I have translated my books into Spanish, so they're also available by two translators that are also QHHT hypnotists. I use for my first book, it was Laura Meiter, and she is a great translator. She does some of Julia and Dolores Cannon's books as well. And she helped me out with this book. And then I've also got a second book, which I talk a little bit more about. It's another past lifetime of mine that goes into the understanding of Lemurian Atlantis. But this was actually the first lifetime I ever understood in any of my sessions with Sarah. And if I could just take a second back just to talk about that real quick, because it connects into all of them. I asked in my first session, I wanted to know what my last lifetime was. Like, who was I before this? Let's just go to the most basic one so I can understand who I am now a bit better. And I understood that I was a young woman in the 1970s, the late 70s in New York City, which is also the city I was born into in this lifetime in the early 80s. And that I had ended my life very early in my early 20s in that lifetime because of things I began to understand about myself that others perceived as crazy. And I understood in my first session that I ended my life by jumping off a bridge into the waters of New York City during a very cold, wintry evening. And so I was like, well, that just doesn't sound like me. I've never been, like one to feel inclined towards that kind of behavior, or anything. So we tried to understand it a bit more, and why this young woman, my name was Christy in that lifetime, why that happened to her. And what ended up being what we understood was that Christy began to understand during her early lifetime, her past life memories of Atlantis, Lemuria, everything that I talk about in this book. So in the 70s, in this past incarnation, I became aware of all of this already, but it failed. It was not the right time. I was way ahead of myself in that lifetime, and society was just not prepared to deal with a woman talking about something like that without throwing her into a mental institution, saying, hormonal issues, another one that needs to have a little shock therapy and get her life together and then get married and have a bunch of kids to make her sane. So
right.
it was kind of what I dealt with in that lifetime. And I was just abused so badly in the hospitals that this was the only way I felt I could escape, was to go into and end my life. And I talk a lot in this book about after the life, like after that life ended, where you go, what happens to you, what you experience, what you begin to understand about your true authentic self and your eternal existence, and how all of these experiences combine and create something that's very special, but it's on like a whole different level. And it's something we all experience and combine and contribute towards. And I talk a lot about that in this book. And so it's just the precursor in a way to my first book, The Child of the Universe, but it actually takes place like 50,000 years later. So it's called The Gift of the Stars. So those are, and I just had this one translated into Spanish as well by Martin Rivera, who's also another great QHHT hypnotist and therapist. And he's based out of Long Island. So some good.
Awesome. And then in your life in New York, your previous one, were you sent to the asylums for speaking like these truths?
I was originally sent to a psychiatric ward for observation because I had a boss of mine. I worked in the media, I worked in a news station. A boss of mine was sexually harassing me and was trying to get me to sleep with him. And I fought back and I refused. And he basically called the hospital instead and said that I needed to be committed, and that I was having an emotional reaction and they needed to take me in for observation. That way he would cover his ass and not have to worry about me speaking out and people believing me.
Yeah.
And that was my initial step in that lifetime into the psychiatric ward, that my boss put me in there for that reason. once I was in the psychiatric ward, I came into contact with a young woman I had met as a young child, and she had this pendulum that she used to use, and it was a red crystal, and she used to make all this interesting stuff happen. But we had gone our separate ways as young children and didn't have contact until we were back into the treatment center there. And so we began to kind of understand through each other our otherworldly like origins. I understood from these lifetimes, all of this past life regression hypnosis and everything I've understood, that life on this planet, or I believe it to be anyway, came from somewhere else. We didn't just appear. We didn't just evolve from nowhere. It wasn't just magic and poof, here's humans. We came from another planet. We came from somewhere else. We were seeking refuge. We were seeking to continue our kind. And this is kind of how the evolution of that all, unfolded over the last couple of 100,000 years. But in that lifetime, I remembered that. And with this young woman in the psychiatric center, we both remembered being these early beings being created on this planet and being created in these labs and raised by these otherworldly beings and having strange powers. So I talk all about that in the book, and just how a doctor that was there caught on to the two of us and what we were learning and what we were doing, and wanted that red crystal for himself and wanted that power. And it's just this continual theme of just people wanting to disempower you of your natural birthright, and you choosing to claim it for yourself and to reinstate yourself in what it is, what your heritage should be, and understanding it in a whole different way than just understanding based on a country your family was from or a language or a religion you followed, but understanding truly where we all came from as a species.
Right, definitely. And the evolution, and how things can repeat. And I think that's pretty fascinating because you're right, things will repeat until they are addressed or shared or changed
Yes.
or something. And so how do you feel that breaking free from the time of New York and the time of Atlantis and Lemuria, how do you feel now and this time to break free from those things?
You know that feeling you get when your room is a mess, and like if you clean it, you're going to find all the things you need to find, and then suddenly it's going to open up so much stuff for you, like you're going to be able to have those people over and do that, and you'll know how to do that. That's how it felt for me. It felt like I finally cleaned my room for like the first time in this lifetime, and I was able to compartmentalize things, to organize things, and to see a bigger picture that I was refusing to see before this. I had
Mhm.
seen shreds and bits and pieces, and I had interesting feelings on things and weird memories of things. And then I started to do the hypnosis, and all of a sudden, like it just everything started clicking together. And I was a little afraid at first, to be honest. I thought people were going to think I was crazy. I didn't want to deal with something like that. I had small children, like I have 2 master's degrees. I didn't want to go down the road where people just invalidated my mind and my thoughts because I was associating my thought pattern with something that was out of the ordinary or something out of the box. But one of the biggest things I've learned is to just let go of that apprehension and to not worry about what other people are thinking about me, because you're going to waste a lot of time on that, a lot of
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
And
Then you have to redo it in another life.
exactly. And then you just end up redoing it and doing it over until you finally learn to respect yourself and to allow yourself to be who you authentically are, to
Mhm.
believe what you feel is right, and to just go forward in your life and to allow these lessons to teach you and to grow with them, rather than distracting yourself and fighting them and, regressing yourself to a place where you just, are not happy. And I think
Right,
a lot of us do that. I know I've done that in the past, and it's just something I've shed very quickly with learning all of this new information and taking it on.
right. And do you have plans to write any other books right now?
Yeah, I'm actually working on my third book right now.
Okay.
And do you want to know a little bit about it?
Yes, please.
Yes, definitely. So during our sessions, I was told by my doctors, you have to take your birth control out. We think it may be causing the eye issues as well.
Mhm.
But you have to be really careful. Don't get pregnant, because with this kind of a medical condition, it's very serious. We don't want you to get pregnant. And so I got pregnant. I did. It was definitely an interesting moment. I wanted to, and I was afraid that things were going to happen. They were afraid I might stroke out while I was, pregnant with the baby. There were a lot of health concerns during the time, but during that time, Sarah helped me do a lot of hypnosis while I was pregnant to help me kind of maintain my pregnancy, keep it very healthy. And I was so lucky. I went into the hospital on my due date. I had a C-section and I gave birth to a beautiful little baby. And she was so healthy and happy and good. And I was good. And I really think the hypnosis made a huge difference in all of that until I got home and I had four small children and I had a C-section that was giving me some issues, and I ended up, it's a little much, but I ended up reopening my section at home, and it wasn't healing, and I needed to be able to get up and get kids to the bus stop and brush hair and make dinner, and I couldn't do anything, and the baby was also needing attention. And I asked Sarah, I said, would you mind coming over to my house? Could you help me? Could we do a QHHT session? Can we see if it'll help physically just like heal this incision? Because we'd only so far just done it to deal with, the swelling and stuff. And I said, well, wouldn't that be an interesting experiment to see if it does start healing quickly and, it does whatever. I'm desperate. Help me. I got to like watch these kids. They're going crazy. So she came over one day, and that morning it was beautiful out, but about 45 minutes before she was supposed to come over, the skies turned black. This rainstorm came through and she had to wade to my front door up to her knees in water. That was how, like, the storm that just blew through. And we always had these weird things that would happen like that during our sessions. The weather would always change very dramatically, and we would have these extreme weather phenomenons like huge lightning storms, massive flooding. Like it got to the point where we were like, maybe we should try to not meet as much and spare everybody all of this. But no, it was way too much fun to do the session. So we dealt with the weather. So that was our big weather thing for that moment. And she came over and she did a past life regression hypnosis session on me. And in this lifetime that we went to, that I was brought to by my guides, my higher self, I went to a place that we would think of now as early Sumeria, like pre-ancient Sumeria, before it became a big, big civilization, when it was just the people who lived in the reeds, the people who lived in the mountains, and the farmers and the shepherds out there who weren't yet congregating. And the lifetime I experienced was that I was a young woman. I was in my early 20s, and I was there, and I was trained my entire life to know that in our prophecies that these visitors were going to come back, that they had been in this area before a long time ago, and that we had been a part of a race of people who were created to help mine gold, and that we were no longer under their jurisdiction. They had left. But in this lifetime, they returned, and they were looking for brides. They wanted women. They wanted to impregnate women. They wanted to basically do some pretty messed up things and reinstate their claim on the land and continue doing what they had been doing before the great floods happened during like the Younger Dryas period, where we had been living within mountain ranges and just living up high in elevation to stay away from all the flooding and the extreme weather changes. So this lifetime, I began to understand that I was part of this situation where my village was entirely destroyed by these visitors who came back from the stars to reclaim us as workers, and that we fought against them. And my whole village was destroyed because we all fought against them. And I was taken away and I was hidden away by this traveler and married off to this other leader as protection, just to protect me during this time. But these, what I call the watchers, they would watch us from far away. They wouldn't stop until they found me. They wanted to pretty much erase that whole village. And this whole lifetime is all about me dealing with these watchers, these giant beings. They were massive. They were so tall, and learning how to free ourselves from them, to try to destroy them, to kill them, to just get us and the people that we still had in that area of Sumeria, and to free them from these people, before these beings, before there was nothing left but a slave race. So that's what I talk about in this book. I've called it The Daughters of Men. And it's all about that lifetime. And in the lifetime, I couldn't have children because of something that the watchers did to me. And it was all part of the last, and if this helps at all, I'm still working on the book. I still have another couple of months left to finish it. But my last scene that Sarah took me to in that lifetime was I was in something that had a giant arc over the top of the ceiling, like this massive arc. And around me, surrounding me, were all of my great grandchildren and my grandchildren. And I couldn't really understand how early on in this lifetime I couldn't have children. But then here I am later on in this lifetime, and I have so many, and there's so many of them, and they're all here. And I started to understand a little bit about hybrid humans during that time. And basically like the creation of them, but in creation of them, as opposed to creating more of the watchers, but creating a different type of hybrid human beyond that, and to evolve the species that way as a form of, I don't want to give too much away because I'm still working on it, but it's like as a form of resistance of creating a different kind of human and helping to procreate and to put that out there in order to balance out this other type of human hybrid that was being created by these watchers who had come to create more of the slave race. So the book's all about just reclaiming yourself, reclaiming your identity, finding yourself again, and just putting aside your fears and learning that your fears have no control over you unless
Right.
you, yeah.
Yeah, because we have kind of, well, when I say we, I guess these humans, we've kind of become like this slave race, you're right. And still to this day, I really feel like we are still a part of that slave race. And so I still have many questions about the book, but I definitely want you to finish that. Um,
Yeah, I'm
so
so happy to share it with you when it is finally done. But I think there's still a lot of my books reflect what's going on in my life also. I find that I'm understanding more information because I get to a certain point of understanding in my life or a situation happens. And I think I'm going through something right now that's helping me to understand that lifetime and to write it better. So once it's done and I've learned my lesson, it's super easy to write the books, but kind of during it, it gets a little, sometimes it could be a little hard at times because you've got to go back, you've got to relive those lives in so many ways. And you start to see the people in your lives are repeats of what you had before. And you start to look at your situations and see how you've repeated them. And you start to realize, well, am I doomed to repeat things, or is this the ultimate chance to finally free my soul of making these mistakes over and over again? And once I do, does that mean like I've cleaned my room? Now that all this new stuff is available for me to do. And it's, it kind of creates like a blank slate in a lot of ways where you can now do so much more because you've washed that away and it's not affecting you anymore. But I've
right.
talked much. Sorry, I talk so much.
No, no, it's wonderful. I mean, and I guess my one of my questions I have is your boss in New York in that last life. What was
Mhm.
his connection to you in Atlantis?
Do you know what? He was definitely one of the people there who was keeping me in. I was a political prisoner. I was taken by the Atlanteans from Lemuria after they destroyed Lemuria with the giant wave. And I was taken to Atlantis and kept in this political prison. And the scientists and the prison guards were terrible. They tried to do all kinds of things to me to get me to teach them how I utilized these crystals, these red crystals my family used to guide Lemuria, that we had received these crystals from our otherworldly ancestors. And they tried so hard to just constantly just one, humiliate me into giving them the information, two, physically abusing me into giving them the information. And the doctor in that lifetime as Christy and my boss in that lifetime as Christy both had shadows of themselves in Atlantis as my keepers during that time.
Mm. And then in New York, when you went to the psych ward and you met someone with the red crystal pendulum,
Yeah, her name was
what was
Stan.
what was that connection and from Atlantis?
I don't know if she was specifically in Atlantis with me, but our past life connection in that one goes back to pre-Atlantis. So I have very early past life regression memories of being part of this first earliest expedition, even beyond the commander, the first groupings that were brought to Earth. And I would say you'd look at something like Antarctica. I remember it being like on Antarctica, but we had these silver domes and we were children that were created, like the first hybrid children. And I remember us running in circles around these domes to create this energy that was supposed to be this healing energy that we would like learn and grow from. And Danny was one of the children there with me. And I remembered that. And that was where our big connection was, that we were both part of this early legacy that somehow had trickled down through the ages, though most of us had been destroyed throughout, the ages. And there wasn't as much of a genetic a genetic legacy left, except for within a few of us at that point. So Danny also, I believe, not as much Atlantis, like in Atlantis, but I believe she was also a descendant of the young woman Devika that was an Atlantean that ends up being able to flee Atlantis at the end of my first book that I come into contact with. And I give her my memories and my power and my experiences before she goes. I'm able to transfer all of this information over to her, and she kind of disappears within this thing I call the chasm, but a lot of people know it more as like a stone circle. In
Mhm.
my sessions, I began to understand that they were used as a transport device early on by our early, like ancient ancestors, from wherever, whatever, galaxy they've come from, realm they've come from. And that was how they would go from site to site, basically checking on the hybrid children and the small colonies that were being set up. And they were still functional, at that point. And that was kind of how Devika escapes Atlantis. But I think many people who feel like they're connected to the story of Danny or Christy or even Devika, I think a lot of them are descendants of these people. And that's why I get a lot of readers who write to me and they're like, I feel so connected to her. I feel so connected to this. And
Mhm.
it's like it helps me understand why so many people feel that connection, is because I think there was a lot of hybridization going on, and a lot of us share those genes, and those memories are encoded within those genes.
Right.
That makes sense.
It does. It does make sense.
Okay, all right.
No, it's amazing. Um, and you know, I fully love QHHT and Dolores Cannon's method and the possibilities, endless possibilities of what we can discover and find and reveal and heal in the body, and to heal the timelines, and not just this timeline, but other timelines as well. And, the past and the future. And it really does tie into the present moment, as we could say. And so it's really powerful and amazing that you're able to heal yourself and expand your mind, and even be able to open yourself enough to step into that hypnosis experience.
Mhm.
Even if you didn't believe it 100% at the time, it's fascinating, because I have seen that with people. They're like, oh, I don't even know if this is going to work for me, and then they're the ones that end up going under regression,
Mhm.
more than other people, and so it's fascinating of what can come forward. And thank you for sharing that. And do you have any other books that you're going to be working on in the future?
Yeah,
Because I know you said there was one that you were working on before you started your hypnosis sessions.
yeah,
Have you
actually
gotten to that one?
I don't think I'm ready to finish writing that one yet. I think I've got this one I need to write that is about that lifetime in Sumeria. That's next. And then I have this feeling there's another book I have to write after that. And then I can get to the one that I had started writing before, that I'll have enough information at that point about my understanding of myself to finish that book that I couldn't finish to begin with. And it actually had nothing to do with Lemuria, Atlantis, anything like that. My first book, it was just about this woman and her running away with her children and trying to find a better life with and coming across this other woman who was an older woman and kind of needed people to come into her life at that time. So it was very mundane. It was nothing compared to like, blowing Atlantis up or anything like that. It wasn't even in the same genre, but one
Yeah.
day, one day I'll understand it a little bit better and know why I needed to write that. But I'm also looking to maybe write a kid's book at some point. I have so many little kids. I'm like, I read so many books. Why shouldn't, maybe one day get something out.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because as you were talking about books, I saw a vision of kids' books. So maybe that's something
Ooh,
that out in the ethers you
I've
know?
been thinking about that a lot lately, actually, because I bring my kids to the library every week and we load up a big bag and we get all these books and we read them. And sometimes they're really interesting. And other times I'm just like, wow, there's nothing really out that, like, there is, but there isn't. But kids need to have a better understanding of like who they are because they're so much more perceptive to it as children. They're so much more open to it. I remember believing so much more stuff about myself as a child and being more open and aware of it and losing it over the years, just becoming more conditioned to the regulations of society, and you lose yourself in all of it. So I think that's something I'd like to look at as far as a kid's book goes in the next year or so, is just keeping that part of yourself true and not losing it.
Yeah, that's amazing. And then the age groups, there's such a wide age group that you could work with whatever you decide to write.
Totally. I got kids on all different age groups, so it works out pretty well. If it's not good for one, I'll just try the next group. But I'm sure they could advise me and guide me during the whole process. They're pretty in tune with things.
There you go. That's amazing. And tell us where you can or where we can find your books now, and if there's anywhere else other than online that we can find your books as well.
Gotcha. Right now, I use Amazon as my major publishing source because they've made it really efficient for me. And you can go on Amazon, you can find both my books, well, all four of them there. I have the two in English and then the two in Spanish. But instead of searching through Amazon, if you want to learn a little bit more about me, about my experience, and to also have links, direct links to purchase my books, they're available in paperback, hardback, and also an ebook. So whatever, you want to use, it's all there for you. And my website's got all of that information. So if that's a little bit easier for people, it's JLF Sullivan, my writing name.com. And it'll bring you right there. It'll show you all about my first two books on the first page. And I have a blog that I write every now and then. And I put all my links to my interviews and things like that up there. So if it's of interest to any readers to learn a little bit more about me or to find more links to things, it's all on that one site.
Okay, wonderful. And then are you doing any events or workshops or lectures? Are you sharing your story are you traveling anywhere? Are you doing any
Right
show?
now, my littlest one turned 4 the other day, and I felt like for the first time in like almost 5 years, I felt like I could breathe a little bit and I could actually start to look at the future and think, I can go do things. I could go away for a day or two and the world's not going to fall apart right now. So I started looking at possibly doing the Conscious Life Expo in LA at some point, of also doing some work with Laura Miter, who's moving here to the big island of Hawaii that we live on. And she's going to be doing some interesting conferences over at her place and different types of like meetings and sessions. So I'm going to work with her on that. And I've got a lot of things kind of planned coming up in the future. I've just nothing set in stone yet. I think I'm ready though to kind of take it to the next level, where over the last couple of years since I wrote the book, I've kind of had to been a little bit more low key, just because like I had babies and little ones at home and they needed me. And I figured if the book was that important, it would wait for me for when I was ready to kind of throw it out there and be as fully immersed in it as Sarah's been able to be over the last couple of years. So the
Yeah.
time is right. Then I
Yeah,
see there's lots of things I'd love to do in the future, definitely. But
right. Well,
nothing's
it's
booked.
great because as you're at home, as your memories unfold and as things come out, the books write themselves. And so there's right and divine timing for everything. And so I can't wait to see you at the Conscious Life Expo, and I can't wait to hear about more of your events that are going to be in the future. And then just share with us anytime you have anything going on, and we
I
can
would love
talk about those too.
that. Sounds great. Thank you. I know it's kind of like a step in a new direction for me. So it'll be really interesting to share it with you and see how it goes. A little nervous, but can't stay
Yeah,
on this tiny island forever over here. Got to get out there at some point and see people.
yeah, that's true. That's true. And so I'm sure you're really excited about the future. And, if is there anything else that you can share with us about your books or your experiences with QHHT and that healing that has significantly changed your life, other than, being able to free yourself and heal yourself and to become an author and to share those stories finally. So
Yeah.
tell us anything else that you can think of that might be helpful for anybody listening.
I can definitely tell you just on the emotional level and the level of like the understanding I had about myself. I used to think I was very in tune with myself, and I was. I wasn't, in a place where I didn't really get myself. But here's what I understood through QHHT, and especially about like my healing. I realized that like the brain is a very concise muscle. Like it really effectively does a good job at what you want it to do. And when you're thinking about things like illness and you're living in a situation where there's nothing but disaster around you, you start to create this image in your mind that this is all you deserve, and that you bring more and more and more of it into your life. And I tend to notice in my life there'll be cyclical things like that where, one bad thing would happen and 10 more bad things would happen, and it would be like, oh my god, why does this always happen to me? And you get all ego, driven and whatnot. And
Yeah.
so, what I began to understand about myself throughout all of QHHT and all of this is that your brain controls all of this. Your thought pattern controls all of this. It controls your illness, it controls your wellness, it controls your prosperity levels, your success, your defeats, everything. It is all down to you and what you are creating for yourself and what you're thinking. And one of the biggest triggers I had in understanding this was realizing that my illness was something that I could flip a switch on, that I chose for this to be happening. Whatever the reason was, I began to understand it, and it was to help me understand things, but it was also to help me clear my life out. My pre-hurricane life was a life that was a good life, but it wasn't authentically me. It was something that I did as a survival mechanism. And I lived within the realms of just constantly making sure like my children had food and like my house was clean. And I went to work every day, and I was a teacher and I owned a business. And I never spent much time really thinking about me. It was always, just pushing things off and, being that person and that self-sacrificing person. But I've understood so much through my healing with QHHT, and I've understood that my healing is completely dependent on how I'm feeling about myself and my surroundings and what I'm allowing my life to look like. And that meant my relationship with my partner, my relationship with my children, with my friends, with my family, the career that I had at that time. Just so much stuff I had to look at, and I really had to like consider what it was doing to me. And I know everyone, not everyone thinks like, oh, well, I got to go to work every day. I got to do this. I can't change. But once you get so in tune with your mind that you're able to start controlling your health and to control so that you can actually see again out of your eye, you realize there's not much you can't do. So I started to understand all of these relationships I had with people, and I began to break them down and work on them differently. The results have been remarkable in my life. I have completely different relationships with all of these people now, 3 years later, after having done these sessions and having a better understanding of one, myself, and two, like how I want to be treated and how I want my interactions with people to go. It shouldn't just be a one-way street where it's just I have to accept and be, that person for them so that way they can have this. Like, no, I'm as much a part of it as anything else. And if I don't accept that and make myself aware to it, then you're just doomed to relive the same circumstances over and over and over again. It's like insanity. And you're thinking, you know, when does this change? When does it get better? Well, it changes and it gets better the minute that you decide for yourself that you want something better for yourself. And that's you moving away from that old lifestyle completely and allowing change to completely take over your life. Like you can't go back. You can't be that person anymore. You have to be someone different. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people, is trying to create this version of yourself that's the best version of yourself that you are most comfortable with. And it takes a lot of understanding, a lot of experimenting, like a lot of figuring it all out and breaking down relationships till you can get to the core of it. But QHHT has really helped me like swim through that and to create a world around me that my life is unrecognizable like 4 or 5 years later. I'm looking at where I was 5 years ago when I first found out I was pregnant with my youngest, and now where I am. My life is so much happier. I feel so much more content. I don't have more materialistic stuff in my life. It was never, it was never a result of anything like that. I've actually become less material, and I feel so much better about it. I feel more in tune with nature. I live a more sustainable lifestyle. My family's happier. My relationships are more authentic. Like I could go on and on and on about how amazing it's been for me, but it I just want to make sure everyone understands that it's not, a quick fix kind of situation. I didn't do one session and I was like, woo, life is perfect. That first session started me off on a journey and I was willing to complete it. And when I completed it, or as I don't even feel like I fully completed it, but as I'm getting closer to like growing and learning with it, it's fulfilled me. And I realized I wasn't really fulfilled like that before all of this. And it's great. It really is. I highly recommend it to anyone who's going through stuff or just wants to better understand themselves and see how you fit into this big picture.
Yeah, it definitely satisfies and soothes the soul, doesn't it?
It does. It brings up a lot of questions and sometimes it throws me through a loop and gets me a little bit like, what is going on there? But it
Yeah.
always breaks down and works out for your best possible benefit, even if you like it or not. Sometimes you fight things that are the best for you and you look back and you're like, why did I do that? But
But it all makes sense in the end. Once you look at the signs.
for me, it has so much makes sense. And, you
Mhm.
know, I've realized anyone in my life who's not interested in like seeing that or understanding it, like they don't need to. And if that's not a relationship they want to have with me anymore, that's fine too. Everyone should be free to kind of believe what they want to believe about themselves and, surround themselves with like-minded people. And I feel I've been growing more in that direction as I've gone through these sessions and understood that. So
Yeah, it brings a sense of control into your life, doesn't it?
that is such a key word there. Like you finally have control over your life and what's going to be happening in it and how you're going to react to things, most importantly.
Right. And the visual I got for that is, like something being on the television. There's a rerun, like Groundhog's Day.
Yes,
It's like you have to change the channel. You have to get up and change the channel and do something about it, unless it's just going to repeat.
exactly. And it'll keep going over and over again. And it shows up as different people, it shows up as different situations, but it's always the same thing at the end. And it's a
Yeah.
lesson you've got to learn. It's something you're supposed to experience. And most people fight against that idea. They think experience or lessons are negative things. And, you got to go through crap in order to get to it. And it doesn't always need to be that way. It's a very peaceful experience and it brings you to a really good place of like, just inner enlightenment of understanding your true like need to be in existence on this planet right now. Oh, and
Right.
that also my favorite thing like I learned in my sessions is that no matter what happened in the past and what you've done, this
Mhm.
is the most important part of your existence right now. It's this moment that you're physically conscious and putting that energy into, and you're here for a reason. You're supposed to be doing something with it. You have to get in touch with what it is. And I think that's why a lot of us tend to get stuck on the whole who are we? Why are we here? Eternal question. But the more I did QHHT, the more I understood it. And it made perfect sense to me who we are, why we're here. Well, we're in
Yeah.
a we're a species that is hell bent on surviving and evolving, and we've been to so many different planets before this, and we're going to keep going. And we just need to get to different levels of evolvement in order to progress and to understand ourselves. And it's kind of amazing when you think about it. What an
Yeah.
amazing to be a part of.
Yeah. I like it because it's almost like revealing the playbook,
Yeah, right.
the cheat codes.
Cheat codes. Yeah. But I think that's something we're supposed to understand, though. We're supposed to have those cheat codes. It's supposed to be there to help us. But so many of us just get conditioned into thinking like this is just nonsense, that we have to go things or traditional route, or, you
Mhm.
know, people who think this way are crazy and abstract and whatnot. And it's so antiquated in that way of thinking that I'm so glad to see more and more people who are moving towards different frames of thought and different types of just self and outward understanding. So that way, maybe one day we can move away from this constant cyclical
Oh
series
yeah.
of events that we see around us on the earth and maybe move towards something a little bit better than this.
Yes. 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 The Great Awakening. It's happening. It's
It
happening.
is. You
You
can
know,
feel you can feel the change happening. And I know it's the beginning and it's budding and it's small and it's infantile, but I think it has immense power once people realize how empowered they will become from it and how knowing your true self and looking at the conditioning that surrounds you and comparing them will truly like set in motion so much freedom for you.
yes, I agree. I agree. Thank you. And then also I wanted to share something with you. I don't know if I've told you this directly,
Mhm.
but in 2015, I was T-boned in a car accident. And from then, I was permanently disabled from the waist down with permanent neuropathy. And the doctors couldn't do anything for me. And so after about 2.5 or 3 years, um, at that point I had already surrendered to a solution because there was no way of healing. The doctors couldn't help. I tried different types of therapy,
Yep.
and I just pleaded, I surrendered, completely. If they're not going to help me, I have to find something that will.
Yeah.
And so down the line, through YouTube, I saw this amazing hypnosis session taking place. And I didn't know what that woman was doing, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do with my life. And so I didn't know it was even hypnosis. But when I looked further into that technique, it ended up being QHHT. And so I went to the website, and I think the first testimony I saw on that page was your testimonial
Wow.
about being healed from your session. And so that was one of the first times that I realized that the physical healing was capable, and that other people were getting healings, getting off crutches and getting off oxygen. And
Wow.
so I thought at that point, well, let me try this. Like, if this can help other people like this, then let me
Yeah.
try this for myself. So I tried the hypnosis session, and within the first session, I, of course, had the questions of, who am I? Why am I here? Because at
Mhm.
that point in my life, everything was falling apart, and I mean everything. And so it was just one of those moments, grand moments. You're like, okay,
Mhm.
what's really happening here? And along with everything crumbling, I was suicidal. And so I really just wanted to know, why am I here? What
Yeah.
is the purpose of all this? And so within my session, I learned from the accident that I was on the wrong path. And at the
Mhm.
time, I was a full-time massage therapist, and I was also working on film sets. And so higher self told me she wasn't supposed to be a massage therapist, she was supposed to be a hypnotherapist. And
Mhm.
so from then, the permanent neuropathy and nerve damage in my body healed and corrected itself.
Mhm.
And so since then, I've been doing hypnosis, and it's really changed my life because even before the car accident, my body it felt like a wreck. I mean, I felt like an old lady. And so it really does make a difference when you open your mind and pay attention to the signs around you and those messages that you're receiving from the universe. And so I just want to say thank you for sharing your testimonial and your story and following through with the process with Sarah. So thank you.
That's wonderful. I had no idea that my testimonial was even up on their webpage, to be honest. And it still amazes me that like anyone even knows about this, that what happened to me, like it's
Yeah.
amazing to see like how something that happens in your life that could be so negative can turn into something that could be positive for someone down the road. And it makes it all worthwhile. And thank you for sharing that. Like I had chills, I have goosebumps on my arms as you were telling me about it, because it is, if you're not on the right path and you're not being true to yourself and you're just ignoring it because you've got to survive and you have to do things, like your body is going to break down, it's going to shut down, or you're going to put yourself in a situation subliminally, or the universe is just going to do it for you, where you're going to have to stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people buck up against that and they look at it as something like, why does this always happen to me? Well, you needed a change. You needed a change in your life. And if you weren't going to do it on your own, the universe has got some special ways of making it happen, doesn't they? It
You know
does.
what's funny is that before the car accident, I had already told the universe I wanted a different car and that I wanted a different life path. And so I didn't really pay attention after I spoke that out loud, but then I realized that along the way, there were maybe 3 or 4 or 5 different people in my life, didn't even know each other. They told me, you should be a hypnotherapist. And I said, you guys are crazy. I don't believe in that stuff because I thought it was just, the sensations, addictions, and stuff like that. And so from then I had realized that it is all just about paying attention to the signs. And the signs are really there if you can listen and pay attention. They're there. So
And if you're not going to pay attention and listen, it's going to get you anyway. It
yeah,
will.
yeah. It's a
I've realized
universal slap in the face. It really is because
you're so, yeah.
it stopped me completely. And there was a time where I couldn't even get out of bed. And
Mhm.
so it does make a difference when you stop and listen and pay attention and follow through with those messages. It makes a big difference.
It does. And like, I know we're not alone. I know it's not just like you and me having this one off situation where we both experienced something and like regained our health and regained like our understanding of ourselves. Like, I know this has got to be going on for so many people. And if any of this could, like, you know what I mean, be of help to anybody and just help them kind of get back on their feet and regain their power and, composure and just get a full sense of themselves and I think the deepest part is like really learning to like have that love for yourself and that appreciation that you talk about so much, but it's hard to do it when you have so much conditioning and so many ideas of what you think your life's supposed to look like. So
Yeah,
it's not an easy world to pioneer into, but it's so worth it.
it is. It is. It is. And it sends you in the right direction if you just trust the process.
Totally,
So,
totally does. No regrets.
right. None whatsoever.
Right. Oh
So
my
that's
goodness.
fascinating. So thank you.
Thank you. This is
And
wonderful.
is there any place where we can find you through social media other than your website?
I've got a couple of links on my website too. I have an Instagram account that I like to use, and I also have a Facebook account that's up that I'm linked on to. I'm on LinkedIn, which is, kind of there. It's kind of
Yeah.
new for me. I'm still getting my head wrapped around it. And I kind of just keep it simple with that kind of stuff and take it from there and, you know,
Hmm.
communicate the best I can through those methods right now. I try not to let social media be too much in my life. It could easily wrap you up and you could spend most of your day on it. And I've
Yeah.
realized over the last couple of months, maybe take a little bit of a step back from it and make it more quality versus quantity in my life when it comes to social media. So if you want to see what that looks like, you can find me Facebook, Instagram. I'm JLF Sullivan on both of them.
Beautiful. Yes, and we can share your social media and your websites for everybody to find. And is there anything else you want to share with anybody I know you shared where we can find your books, which is on Amazon. Is that also international,
Most of
worldwide?
the time, I believe it internationally goes through about 15 other countries,
Okay.
but it all depends on kind of like how Amazon's feeling that day.
Okay.
Like, Jeff Bezos flips a coin and says what countries it can go to, but I know it's available in Mexico, it's available in Canada, the UK. I know I had a couple of friends who bought it in Afghanistan at one point, so I know it makes its way around the world in its own time. And
Do you have ebook?
yes, ebook. I do all of it through Amazon. So you can buy like the Kindle version, you can buy the paperback or the hardback on there. I think
Okay.
down the road I might look at other publishing platforms like Barnes and Noble or, even doing direct sales through my website, but I'm just not equipped to do that at the moment. Baby steps. Get in
Yeah, no,
there.
it's okay. There's also a Google Play if you
Yeah,
need Google Play for ebooks.
Definitely. I'm looking at that. And oh, and my audiobooks. I'm going to start recording my audiobooks pretty soon and hopefully get those up and out and just do it all myself. So
Yeah, how exciting. That was my next question, was audiobooks, because I've looked for your books on Audible, but I haven't been able to find them.
yeah, they're not there yet, but they will be. I've got all the equipment. So I'm going to start. I'm actually doing the whole thing myself. This is going to be a really interesting learning experience, but
That's
hopefully my past experience working in radio as a journalist hopefully I could still remember a lot of the editing techniques and it should be fine. We'll get it
just put
together.
yourself under regression.
Yes, exactly. I need to channel the energy of the greatest audiobook reader ever created. But I'm going to try to do those in Spanish and English. I have translators who want to do them in Spanish. So hopefully maybe I can get it all done at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm looking by the end of the year to have them all up online for audiobooks. So
All right. Both of them?
looking for both of them.
Okay.
Hopefully, most likely one,
Yeah,
maybe
let's
two.
shoot for one.
We
Two
should
would be amazing.
It would
Yeah.
be. I'd be excited for that, but it won't be far behind with the second one.
Yeah, definitely. Because I know it can take a lot of time and editing and recording. So
I know. That's why I got
yeah.
to keep my books short.
Well, it's okay. We'll just jump timelines.
That's it.
And we'll make
Exactly.
them both, we'll make it both work at the same time. We'll figure it out.
I love that as an answer. We'll just jump timelines. No biggie. Just go on
It's
for this
already done.
experience. It's all good.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story and, your experiences and with other people and how they can also find it within themselves to take this journey. And, because I know that some people have never even heard of this option for healing or discovery. And so it's going to be very eye-opening for many people. And
It is an eye-opening experience, isn't it? Like it's amazing.
literally.
Yeah, like literally.
Literally.
Oh God. No, it's always worth trying something new because if you're not getting anywhere doing the same thing over and over again, it's your best option. Try something new, open your mind up a little bit, see what the universe is trying to tell you.
Definitely. Beautiful. And do you have any final messages for anybody listening today?
I feel it's really important for people right now. What I'm going through is I feel like I'm understanding my own power and how to truly empower myself and how to not need necessarily to be hypnotized to feel this good about myself because I feel like I've been able to create a baseline now of I know how that feels and I know how good it is and I know the benefits that come from it. But there needs to be a way for me to understand how to do that on my own and to do that within myself. And I feel that that's something I'm beginning to understand now. And for anyone else out there who's trying to figure that out in their lifetime, like in this lifetime, that there is an immense amount of power that's within all of us. And it's really up to us to discover what it's there for and how we're supposed to use it and how we're supposed to empower our own lives and empower others through it. And I think empowerment's just a big thing for me right now. And I just want to share that with others and, just don't feel alone. Don't feel lost in things. Don't feel that you're stuck in any situation. Everything is temporary. And you'd be surprised how quickly things can change in your life if you change your thought patterns and you change it's more than your thought patterns. You actually change the way you feel about yourself and the way you see yourself. And once you really start doing that and you see yourself as a person who is healthy, or you see yourself as a person who is successful, you see yourself as a person who's content and peaceful, you can't see yourself the other way anymore. And you just become this whole other version of yourself. And hopefully you like it. I know I'm liking it. So I hope for other people, they find this within themselves too.
Yeah, beautifully said. Beautifully said. And I think I'm full believer that it's all about allowing and accepting
It is.
those changes, because we don't allow ourselves. We have to give ourselves that permission that it's okay.
Truly. You know, 150 years ago, we would have been like burnt the burnt to the town square for talking like this. But
Yeah,
I think,
I was.
yeah, I was too in one of my lives, and it's not a fun experience. So I think we're blessed to be alive at this point in time where we have the ability to say the things we want to say and be the people we want to be. It's probably the first time in a very long time that we've had this ability, and we should really stop downward spiraling and just like look at that and experience that and say, wow, like what can I do for myself and in my life right now? Like, you can say and do pretty much anything, and if you can't, like, you have to work towards it, but you can, it's liberating. It's wonderful.
It is. Yeah, take advantage of the times now, there's
Truly.
there's so much happening and going on and changing and evolving, and
Yeah.
this is a really good time for us as a collective and individuals to step past those fears, because you're right, we were burned at the stake, and those souls now have issues speaking up.
Yeah.
It's just fear, and so we have to look past that fear, accept it, and just put it aside and not allow the judgment, but just to allow that freedom.
Truly, and pave the way for
Yeah.
others with it. We're lucky we both live in a part of the world where we have these freedoms and whatnot, but I know our experience is not identical to other people in other parts of the world who are living under regimes that withhold this information, who push people down, who don't allow them to speak. And more than ever, you see that kind of need for people to overthrow that kind of dictatorship in their life. And if that's one small thing we can do on our own, is to set that example and show that this is a positive lifestyle change for people, it might echo through in other worlds that are here around us right now, but people who really need to know this information and need to know how to empower themselves, because they're living a life that is still, 500 years ago, where they would have burnt you alive for saying anything, except now they've got AK-47s and make it a lot easier for them to take care of that. So
Right.
let it reverberate throughout the planet, because we're in a good position and you have to share it.
Yes, things are changing and times are changing, so the time is now.
Truly.